what I'm presenting today is actually part of a larger project that is financed by, is funded by the Portuguese funding institution. Here's our website. There's a lot of people working on it. It's an interdisciplinary team, some social psychologists, some anthropologists, some communication researchers. And we've been looking through climate futures and just transformations of the young people's perspectives and narratives and political imaginaries. I've been looking at different ways, different tasks involving different moments of data collection. I'll be focusing on this task here, eliciting imaginaries of climate and the future. It's actually, what I'm presenting today is just a small part of the analysis, but this involved 22 focus groups, 154 participants in total. If we interviewed young people, different social economic status, different levels of engagement with climate issues, and with collective action. Actually, we just published a report for the Portuguese-speaking folks. You could access it in our website. We're still preparing articles, and that will be submitted soon. One of the things that was quite striking in this analysis of the talk and the perspectives of young people is that a possible description of a future was not very present, and it was actually very difficult to create with them. And because of that, I took the liberty of wanting to explore this dynamic a bit further. And research in social psychology has been saying to us that utopian thinking, the ways in which we can imagine a better future, is actually one of the most important predictors for collective action intentions. Yet, we see that the youth climate movement has changed its discourse into a post-apocalyptical imaginary. And what does this mean? It means that instead of imagining climate collapse in a certain amount of time, and that we might still have time to revert this tendency, and we might be capable of imagining a different future as a consequence, it looks like that the climate collapse is already here. And if it's already here, where does the utopian thinking really part of this narrative? So this is something that I was interested in exploring, particularly because this sort of imaginaries of whether the apocalypse is already here or if it's still coming would also help young people and young climate activists to understand in what ways or what sort of claims should be made. Would this be more in terms of mitigation of climate change or adaptation to it? And I think the ways in which these imaginaries can really help different ways of envisioning what their action in the present could look like. In terms of adapting to climate change, or what sort of claims they could be making and what sort of actions, is that these could help navigate loss. And loss is something that we probably will have to deal with. This article, the Moore and Marquardt from 2023, they actually do ethnographic work, and they see that although there is a tension between the apocalypse imaginary and the post-apocalyptical one, it is not very clear in how they relate to their own collective action in the present. So it's less clear, it's less consistent. But for exploring these dynamics, I drew from prefigurative politics and its literature that shows that some groups, they rather try to practice the future they want in the present, but also they leave space for contingency. And they leave space because they know that the future is unpredictable. So there's sometimes that we need to figure out along the way. So these two, the tension between having a very clear idea of what the future would look like and having some sort of sense of what it looked like, but also opening their experiences to construct it together as a collective. So for this presentation, I'll be looking at how do young climate activists warrant their climate action in face of a post-apocalyptical imaginary, and in what ways are utopias described and lived in the everyday of young climate activists. As I told you, so the initial project had actually 22 focus groups, but I focused only on the ones that were concerning youth climate groups. scientist rebellion, school climate strike in different cities in Portugal, the fossil occupy movement as well. So the people that were most involved in the types of action that were actually having media attention in these last years in Portugal. So in total, these are 26 young climate activists. Because of this focus on climate activism, we could also include what these two group interviews that actually failed focus groups because we didn't have the amount of people to be part of it. The guide, in the first moment, we focused on agency and political involvement, and in the second part, we really blatantly asked, what does the ideal climate future look like? For the analytical approach, I wanted to really explore the discourse and put it in context, in social cultural context, and also to kind of give space and attention to the everyday epistemologies and understandings of how these groups understand and construct their social realities. So in the first moment, I was identifying the utterances that were including utopias and post-apocalyptical dystopias imaginaries in the discourse, and also exploring what sort of functions these were serving in relation to their own understanding of what they were doing with their collectives and the climate action that they were pursuing. I also wanted to explore in the ways in which utopias were being presented, more particularly, and whether they were very thick descriptions or they were malleable and in construction. For the post-apocalyptical imaginaries, it was very clear that this was the main motive for their action. In this first extract we see here, this climate activist is saying, we will die standing. We will eventually die, but at least we will be standing. If I were to describe climate change, it would be like a car going the wrong way, heading towards a wall. And this is quite a violent image to imagine how our societies are heading towards. Another participant showed that they understand the paradox of this. I see a problem in front of me, and instead of thinking, okay, this is too dystopian, I won't solve it, I think at least I will take a step towards its resolution. So this tension between maybe there's nothing we can do, but maybe we can do something, but always this post-apocalyptical imaginary kind of guiding their own motives of being involved in such a cause. Hope or a potential utopia actually came in their descriptions in the ways in which they were engaging with activism and the spaces of activism. And this first participant is saying it would be a challenge to organize ourselves in a horizontal way. But it's not as difficult as people think. And at the end, no one decides for anyone else, it's all very horizontal in his group, everyone decides all sorts of things, and it was much easier than I was expecting to be. So activism and activist groups being really the spaces where they can practice and experiment different roles and different ways of being. In the second extract, an idea of how these spaces are actually the spaces where they build hope together. Deep down, the ways in which they were engaging together, it's good. It's almost like group therapy. It's about trying to incite political action, and that's what gives me encouragement. So it's not encouragement that makes them get involved in climate action. It's being in these spaces that they're being more motivated and feel like they found other people that understand the issues at stake the same way as they do. Utopias then, there were some references, especially the Zapatistas, of certain societal arrangements that could be desired, and they were very political, radical left sort of thinking. But I found it striking, this is what I wanted to bring you here, is this idea of utopias as a negotiation, the understanding of the difficulty of creating an utopia together. Because we as people, we are extremely complex, and imagining that there's a general solution for us to organize ourselves is difficult. The second extract, now if it were to create a completely perfect utopian community, that doesn't exist, right? There will inevitably be some inequality that arises at the end. I believe that the society I want to live is one that actually actively fights against these problems. So this idea that the most participatory way of being and solving all the issues that the climate and social crisis is bringing is to acknowledge that there will always be conflict. And so that in this sense, that conflict is always present and that we should always be making sense of it. Just to finalize, I think this, again, I didn't put this disclaimer, this is just a preliminary analysis still, but this distinction between pause and apocalyptical imaginaries warranting climate action, I think it's something that is quite prevalent, although the distinction between the two is not as clear, especially in how it can really help these activists navigate loss, which is something that could be done in community and make sense of what sort of losses it will be brought about. Activism being a source of hope, and this is what Van Zomeren also discusses in this paper of that hope in climate action is actually an emotional coping mechanism. It might not do so much to the work that they're doing. And although, again, there were some references to what an utopian world could look like, the absence of the thick and concrete utopian imaginaries was quite striking, and also understanding that they were not collectively elaborated in their groups. So the urgency of the problem is so obvious that they're more concerned with claims making, but not really putting together and say, okay, let's have a very concrete plan. But I also think that the prevalence of this language of contingency is actually quite good of this, what I call utopias in negotiation, because it might be actually necessary to deal with the unknown. Just to conclude, I think this work actually shows the importance for us to really make sense of what climate activists have to say about how futures are envisioned and how they relate to their own action. Utopias in negotiation, I feel that these are imagination spaces that acknowledge the plurality, the intersectionality, and the contingency of the future, of the different experiences that they understand that people go through. I also enjoy, and this is something that is really growing, this idea that activism might be a space of care, a care of in the now. Because of this contingency and this plurality, this acknowledgement of plurality, I've been wondering if this is something that might be guiding them to thinking a radical democracy of what Amanda Machin imagines as in very, very inclusive, in which conflict resolution really needs to be up at the table and not in a constant search for consensus. And that's it. The project has Twitter, Instagram, website. This is my contact. Thank you so much.